So my name is Robyn Shepherd, and my dog training business is called Yes, Positive Training for Your Dog, because we stick with some evidence-based advances in our field that strongly indicate that positive reinforcement is the most effective and most humane way to train your dog. As you can see, MCAT has very graciously agreed to come and video the presentation today, and they will be broadcasting it as well. So if you didn't get enough today, you'll be able to watch it on MCAT, and there will be DVDs available at some point as well. And our talk today is called Dog Whispering, Myth versus Reality. That's me, I'm Robyn. I'm a member of the Association of Professional Dog Trainers, and this presentation is based on an Association of Professional Dog Trainers article entitled, What Are Some of the Common Myths About Dog Training? And basically, when we have a question, we Google it, right? And whether it's a dog training question or a how long do I cook the ham question, we Google it. And we also watch television, and we get a lot of information from television. And of course, we have all of our Facebook friends, as well as our friends and family that we interact with. And so those are all different sources of information that sometimes people get information about dogs and dog training. And sometimes it's spot on, and sometimes it's way off. And so the purpose of our little presentation today is to kind of sort out what is actually useful information and what is maybe outdated or incorrect, but has found its way into the common consciousness nonetheless. So some of the most common dog training myths, we'll debunk some of those, and we'll talk about some new methods that actually work. And this is all in the interest of creating more positive experiences for people and their dogs. Because we want it to be fun and we want it to be easy. We don't want it to be stressful for anybody. So let's play Spot the Myth. If a dog can't learn a behavior, he is either stubborn, dominant, stupid, or some combination of those three. Or every dog is different. Some dogs learn quickly, and some dogs require more coaching. So you decide which one you think is true and which one you think is false. And the reality is, hi, welcome, come on in. The reality is that every dog is different. Some dogs require more coaching than others. That doesn't mean that the dog is stupid or stubborn or dominant. It means that we maybe need to take a different approach to training this particular dog. It means that maybe we need to ask for some help from a professional, but it certainly does not mean that our dog is stupid or stubborn or dominant. You know, it always hurts me a little bit when people say that their dog is stubborn, because it sort of implies that, you know, the dog would do what you wanted it to do if only it didn't have this, you know, character flaw. And in fact, mostly dogs don't do what we want them to do because they don't know what we want them to do, or they don't know what will happen when they do it. That's basically it. So if you have a dog that you're feeling is stubborn, stupid, dominant, or any of the other reasons why we might think our dogs don't obey us, would be some questions to ask ourselves. Are we communicating in a way that our dog can understand? So in other words, are we being simple with our verbal communication? Are they words and phrases that our dog understands and has responded to in the past? Are we letting our dog know when he's getting it right? So this is something that you'll hear me kind of harp on a little, because to me it's the most important thing. I think that it's sort of human nature to point out things that are wrong and try to address problems, and that's great in the human sphere, but it doesn't work as well in the dog training sphere, because you've got this sort of innocent, somewhat confused little creature, you know, and they're sentient and they have feelings and they understand things, but not in the same way that we do. And so it's really important, if we want them to do something, that if they've done it or even come close to doing it, we let them know, yes, that was what I wanted, you got it right. Okay, I think this is just probably going to keep happening. That's awesome. There we go. So what else? Is the environment too distracting for your dog to learn? I see people try to do dog training exercises at the dog park, you know, and sort of, to me, that's kind of doomed to fail. So you want to make sure, basically it's about setting them up to succeed. So is the environment too distracting? If so, you know, take it down several notches. Go to a place where there aren't distractions of other people or other dogs or whatever else might be going on, and just make it time for you and your dog to communicate and work together. And are you teaching the behavior in small enough steps? So this is a big one, because we sort of want our dog to, when we throw the ball, we want them to go get the ball, bring it back to us, and drop it, right? So right there, that's 3 different behaviors, right? And it's tempting to tell Sparky that he got it wrong because he got the ball, but he didn't bring it back, or he got it and brought it back, but he didn't drop it. And what we really want to do is, you're almost right. Getting it was great. Bringing it back was great. And we'll wait for you to drop it. And we can encourage you to drop it in multiple other ways. But we want to remember that behaviors are broken down into little steps. And we want to teach them bits by bits by bits so that the dog has success to build on, build on, build on. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, great. So, spot the myth. My dog looks guilty. He really does look pretty guilty, doesn't he? Because he is reacting to my body language and emotions. Or, my dog looks guilty because he knows he did something wrong. So take a second and think that one over and decide which one you think is true and which one you think is false. And I'll tell you the answer in a second. And I forgot to ask you guys, were any of you here when we did this last year? No. Okay. Anybody have no dogs? Is there anybody here with no 0 dogs? Okay. Who has 1 dog? Okay. Who has 2? Okay. Anybody have 3 or more? Okay. Awesome. Good, good. Just wanted to kind of see what kind of group we have today. So most of us have dogs. All of us love dogs. Nobody seems to be hoarding any dogs, so I think we're in good shape. All right. So the reality is, no matter, and I mean, look at that face, right? Is that a guilty looking dog or what? Right? But the reality is, your dog is reacting to your body language and your emotions. So when you come home and there's trash on the floor or a disintegrated pillow or whatever, you know, disaster du jour your dog has created for your enjoyment, they only have those guilty looking expressions when the owner expects them to. And that's something that they actually did studies on to try and set up the situation, because this is a really pervasive myth, isn't it? Right? Everybody. Like, you look on the internet for guilty dog, and there's a million pictures and videos of dogs like this that people want to use as sort of proof that, oh, when they did that thing, they knew it was bad and they knew they were going to be in trouble. But the reality is that so much conversation, so much communication between dogs and between people and dogs is about emotions. And this is where some of that pack idea comes in. Basically, whatever it is that we're doing and however we're feeling and acting, if you pay attention, our dogs are going to be doing something similar. Because they already know that we're the pack leader, that we're in charge, because we have the thumbs and we can open and close doors and get food and things like that. And also, sort of, they take their lead from us. So this is what we are doing now. So if I see my dog and I'm like this, my dog's going to be like, what are we doing now? Okay, there's something emotionally wrong here. My person is upset about something, and I'm upset too because they're upset. So it can certainly look like the dog is feeling guilty about what they did, but the reality is that when you come home and you're not happy to see your dog, they're going to have a sad face. So if you want to prove it to yourself, there's a couple of fun little things you can do. I mean, you can, for example, put your dog outside and then throw trash all over your kitchen floor and let the dog back in and don't say anything. And a lot of dogs who've gotten in trouble in the past for getting into the garbage will do this. Because it's not that they did it, it's that there's trash on the floor. And trash on the floor equals dogs in trouble, right? The other thing that you can do is, if there is a mess, you can be like, Sparky, look at this mess that you made. And I promise you, dog's not going to look guilty. Dog's going to be like, I know, isn't it great? So I don't know why this thing wants to go to sleep, but that's okay. So they did the studies. Only happens when the owner expects it to. Any prior behavior or events, anything the dog did or anything that happened outside of the dog's control, not a predictor of that guilty expression. And dog body language that looks guilty is learned behavior that is intended to appease humans who display angry or upset body language. So that is sort of the debunking of the dog is guilty myth. What else do we have? Spot the myth. Positive reinforcement training is used with big cats and killer whales, or positive reinforcement training is not effective with powerful breeds or reactive dogs. So think about which one of those statements is true and which one is false, and I'll give you a second to think on it. And the reality is that using positive reinforcement is the norm among trainers who work with big cats, killer whales, and other wild predatory species. And basically, if you can use positive reinforcement to train a killer whale or a tiger, then certainly you can use positive reinforcement training with a powerful breed or with a reactive dog. In fact, research shows that using aversive training methods on fearful or aggressive dogs leads to worse behaviors. So aversive training methods are things like shock collars, things like swatting the dog with a newspaper, things like using a prong collar to punish for leash pulling, things like that. And basically any of those aversive, so an aversive is something that the dog is going to seek to escape or avoid because it's unpleasant and they don't like it. And so some folks do use aversives in training and some don't. But there is some pretty significant research that indicates that using those types of methods, especially on a powerful breed, an aggressive dog or a fearful dog, is actually going to create worse problems than you started with. So focusing on rewarding the animal and alleviating their fears and anxieties is what leads to more well-adjusted dogs and stronger human-animal relationships. So even if you have, you know, a Rottweiler that pulls on leash like a madman and barks like crazy whenever somebody comes to the house, that's the last dog that you want to put a shock collar or punish in any way. You want to teach that dog what it is that you want, what behavior is appropriate, and let them know when they get it right by giving them a reward of some kind. Okay, what's next? Oh, by the way, I do have some pens and some note paper up here if anybody wanted to grab anything to jot down some notes. And there's also some question slips. So whenever, you can pop up and grab one anytime that you want. It's fine. And after we finish the presentation, if anybody's got any questions, we'll do a little bit of Q&A. So think of your questions. Okay. Spot the myth. If my dog is jumping up, pulling on leash, getting on furniture, etc., then he is a dominant dog. Or there are no dominant dogs, only dominant behaviors. So dominance is an interesting thing, isn't it? We hear a lot about it on TV from TV trainers and basically from Facebook and our friends and family because it's one of those concepts that people seem to really grasp onto because it makes things simple for them. So here's the deal. There is no such thing as a dominant dog. There are certainly behaviors that are intended to convey dominance, but that's usually a dog-dog conversation. Dominance describes a social relationship between two or more individuals. It is not a character trait. So in other words, if I say that dog is dominant and then I put him in a group with 5 other dogs, well, he may be dominant over the one dog that he lives with, but in that group of 5 dogs, he may be the low man on the totem pole. So it's a fluid thing, and it is not a character trait. It's just a description of behaviors and relationship. This one I feel like it's important to stress because it seems to have leaked into the pop culture a little bit. Dogs are not trying to control or dominate humans. Most of the time, they're trying to figure us out because we are super confusing. And they're trying to make us happy because when their people are happy, they're happy. So it's not about dominance and it's not about control. It's about a relationship. Most undesirable behavior is a result of dogs acting like dogs because they don't know what else to do, because they haven't had enough experiences of doing something different and being told, yes, that's the right thing. That's what I want. Some other undesirable behaviors can be caused by fear and anxiety, and behaviors that you wouldn't think. Like, for example, some dog jumping up behaviors is actually a distance increasing signal. It's a dog saying that I'm not comfortable with you in my space, and I would like more space, please, back off. So it's important to have these behaviors in a context. Because if I'm waving around an awesome toy and the dog is jumping up, you know, he's not looking for me to get away from him. He's trying to get the toy and he's trying to engage me, and we're gonna have some fun, right? But if I meet a strange dog and they immediately start jumping up, I'm gonna look at their face and see what their expression is. Because I mean, if they're like this, right? Then they're probably jumping up on me because they're really excited and they wanna play and they wanna interact with me. But if they've got like hard eyes and a hard mouth and are just looking weirded out and jumping up and being really forceful, then I'm gonna realize this is a dog that wants some space. And I'm gonna get out of his way. Especially because if it's a giant dog and they jump up on you, they can certainly knock you over. So teach your dog what you want him to do and let him know when he gets it right. You'll be hearing lots of that. Okay. Next one, spot the myth. Food is given to the dog in order to show them they got something right. Or using food in training is bribery. So there's lots of ideas about this. So let's think it over for a second. Decide what we think. And I know none of you are surprised. I know you already knew the answer, because a reward or reinforcer is given to the dog in order to show them they got something right. A bribe is something that you give to an animal to get them to do something that they already know how to do. For example, right, if your dog has a good recall, if they come when you call them, if they've been trained and you've got a lot of successful repetitions, and suddenly Sparky won't come to you, and you pull out a cookie and go, hey, Sparky, want a cookie? And he comes to you, it's a bribe, but it's okay. You got your dog to come to you. You know, you don't want to do that every time. You don't want to show them the treat every time. You know, you want to phase that out. But if you're in a situation where there's some kind of competing motivation and your dog just simply cannot obey you, it's totally fine to up the ante a little bit. You want to go back and work on your recall so that it's a lot more dependable in distracting situations, right? But yeah, a bribe is only a bribe if the dog already knows the behavior, it's not a teaching situation, and you show it to them first, okay? So, for example, if I call Sparky and he comes to me and then I produce a biscuit and give it to him, that is not a bribe. That is a reinforcer. And I like the word reinforcer instead of the word reward, because reward is kind of a loaded word, isn't it? It means that you earned something or that you won something, right? And I'd like to get away from that idea in dog training, because really and truly what reinforcers are excellent tools for communication and ways to get behavior that you want consistently. So when you're teaching something new, there does need to be a motivation to get it right and a signal that they did, right? And also when we use food rewards in training, we're not, yes, we are reinforcing the behavior that we just received, that we like, that we want, and yes, we're rewarding it. But the reality is that what we're actually doing is we are making an investment in future behavior. Because every time that they do a behavior and are reinforced for it, it makes it that much more likely that they will do the behavior again, okay? And so it's not spoiling them and it's not bribing them. It is buying future behavior. It's getting what you want in the future. So it's a different way to look at it. It's a different way to think about it. So an example of a reinforcer in our world, of course, would be getting an A+ in a class from our teacher, or a bonus check from an employer. And trainers, of course, often do use food simply because dogs will work for it. But we also use toys and play and praise and petting and massaging and anything else that dogs like, that they want, that's good news for dogs, we can use as a reinforcer to let them know, yes, you got it right, and I would like more of that behavior. Does that make sense to everybody? Awesome. All right. All righty. So either dogs do what they do because it gets them something they want, or pleasing their owners should be enough of a reward for most dogs. So let's think on that for a second. And dogs do what they do ultimately because it works for them. We all love the idea that our dog wants to please us, don't we? And they do want to please us, but here's why. Because when we're pleased, we're good news for dogs. When we're happy, we're playful, and we give them good stuff. and that's what they want, and so they do the things that make us do those things. So we're all training each other all the time, kinda. The dog-human relationship is mutually beneficial. So even if you may not be actively training or actively rewarding a behavior, just by virtue of being with you and being your buddy, you know, dogs get food, shelter, play, affection, spoiled rotten in the case of my dogs and most dogs in Missoula, Montana, from what I've seen. We are definitely a dog town here, and it's pretty awesome. As a matter of fact, I hope that this isn't too elementary for you guys, because I know that Missoula is a very dog-savvy town, and I know that you guys probably have a lot of knowledge already, but I also see a lot of these sort of mythical ideas being promoted on the internet and on television, and I think it's important to kind of straighten that stuff out, and I think it's important for sort of the quality of life of our dogs, that we all understand how these things work so that we can have effective communication and dogs are happy and people are happy. And so what do we get? Of course, we get loyalty, we get affection, we get security, right? It's a two-way street. And like I said, dogs want us to be happy because we deliver good stuff to them. If you don't reward or reinforce your dog, and instead you expect obedience because they should want to please you, the dog's not going to be sure about whether they did it right or not because they don't have a reward history. So reward history is just a fancy way of saying that they've been taught to do something and that when they have done it, they have received a reinforcer, they have received a reward in the past, which means that they expect a reward in the future and they will do the behavior because they've been reinforced for it. All right. So it's not like they're mercenaries or anything, but yeah, they do what they do because it gets them stuff that they want. Do they love us? Yes, absolutely. Do they want to please us? Yes, absolutely. Because it's a means to an end to get what they want. So just bearing that in mind, you know, we want to understand that there is something that the dog wants, and we want to be aware of it, and we want to be conscious about that so that we can use it to our advantage in training and communicating with our dogs. Okay, older dogs. If you adopt an older dog, it won't bond to you or learn new behaviors. Or dogs can be adopted and successfully trained at any age. So the reality is, any animal can be trained at any age. A dog of any age can bond with a new human family if they are treated with patience and kindness. Older animals may have rehearsed a behavior that we don't like so much for a longer period of time. They've had more practice, and some of these behaviors are self-reinforcing. So if it's something that we don't like and they've had a lot of chances to practice it and they've got a big reinforcement history already around that behavior, it might take a little bit longer for us to change that behavior, but if we work carefully and we use good behavioral science, we can always get results of some kind. We can always get some improvement. And in some ways it is easier to train older dogs than it is to train puppies because older dogs are generally calmer and they have better focus and attention. And chances are, if you've adopted an older dog, that they've had some training already. So often it's just like a refresher course for a lot of the older dogs. So I always encourage people to consider adopting a senior dog because they can absolutely adjust and bond to a new family. And like I said, are calmer and have better focus and attention, so sometimes, you know, an older dog is a better match. What else do we have? Housebreaking problems. We don't have those, do we? All right. Housebreaking problems are usually caused by being left alone too long, veterinary problems or inconsistency in training, or my dog is housebroken. He just pees or poops in the house because he's angry that I left him alone. He's pretty angry. That's the angriest dog on the internet right there. So let's think about a little angry dog for a second and see what we think about that. And as you may have guessed, he's not really angry that you left, and that's not why he's peeing and pooping. If you have housebreaking problems, there's only a few possible reasons, and being mad at you is not one of the reasons. Medical conditions often cause housebreaking issues, urinary tract infections especially. So if you have an adult dog that has begun soiling the house, definitely go to the vet. Separation anxiety related distress is a big reason why dogs soil in the house, because some dogs get into such a panic when they're left alone that they literally lose control of their body functions because they're in such a panic. And so dogs like that, we do a long process of what's called counter conditioning and desensitization to being alone or to their owner being absent. And sometimes we will even talk to a vet about some medication for dogs like that, because separation anxiety is an incredibly distressing condition that some of our canine friends have to endure, and we want to definitely help them out and not punish them for behaviors that happen while they are experiencing that kind of distress. Reason number 3, the dog was left alone longer than he could hold it for. And reason number 4, the dog's not fully house trained. So sometimes, like, I've had clients who have told me they're fully house trained, they're absolutely house trained, but if your dog is having accidents in the house once a week, they're not fully house trained. And so the solution to most housebreaking problems is definitely consult a veterinarian if it's something that's happening out of the blue and your dog is having any kind of symptoms. But other than that, you just do a do-over of housebreaking as if the dog was still a puppy. So you go to your vet, rule out medical causes, and you also kind of pay attention to anything that might have been an environmental trigger, like a new person or animal coming into the house or moving to a different house or different things like that. So those are all things that we want to look at when we see any kind of a housebreaking issue. And when we've got housebreaking issues, basically rule number 1, never let the dog out of your sight. So if you know that your dog's having housebreaking issues and they sneak off and go potty in the house, you cannot yell at that dog because you already knew that they were having issues and you've got to keep your eye on them. I always recommend that people do what's called umbilical cording, where you put a leash around your waist and you just keep your dog with you. And you also get them on a potty schedule. You take them out every hour on the hour, and when they go, you throw them a party. So, and if anybody has any more questions about housebreaking, always feel free to get a hold of me. It's something that I do work with quite a bit. All right, spot the myth. Tug of war. So this can be controversial. People have ideas about this. But tug of war either can be a great reward for good behavior, or you should never play tug of war because it creates aggression. So this particular myth, which is playing tug creates aggression, is something that we were all told and that I used to repeat because I believed it. And as it turns out, as long as the humans make the rules, so the correct way to play tug, as long as the human decides when the game begins and ends, as long as the dog can be trained and encouraged to drop on cue, and as long as the dog can learn to avoid making contact on human skin with their teeth, and then last but not least, definitely, tug toys should only come out when the owner is ready to play tug. If you leave tug toys laying around, tug is less reinforcing as a reward, and also in my house, they get dissected. I can't leave tug toys laying around because they will be just a heap of shredded yarn in, so many minutes. So those are all of my ideas about playing tug. Using tug as a reinforcer instead of food is actually very common among dog sport and training professionals because dogs enjoy it so much. And tug has its basis in natural canine behavior of capturing prey and bringing it around the other pack members to get them to grab onto the prey and play tug, because they're not playing tug, they're dissecting the prey so that they can eat it. And so when your dog brings you something and wants you to grab onto it and play tug with them, this is the behavior that they are mimicking. All right. I shouldn't use food to train because then I will always need food to get my dog to do something. Or the proper use of food in training involves fading or food rewards becoming less frequent. So training with food is controversial still, which is funny because food is the #1 reinforcer. And if you're using positive reinforcement to train, with the vast majority of dogs, food is going to be the best, most reinforcing tool that you can use to let them know when they're doing it right. So you don't want to use food every single time all the time because then, yes, your dog is always going to expect that you have food, and we don't want them. We want them to think they might get a treat, but we don't want them to expect it or demand it. They will only look for food in your hand in the future if you don't fade out the food lures quickly. So luring is when we're teaching a behavior, for example, something as simple as sit, where we will produce the treat ahead of time, and we will show it to the dog, and then put it up and over their head, and most dogs will sit. Their butt will go down, and you give them the treat. So that's luring. Or, for example, teaching something like spin around, right? Here's the treat, spin around, right? And they follow the treat, they follow that lure. So if you don't want to have a treat in your hand to get them to do that behavior every time, once they've had a few successful repetitions using the lure, you fade out the lure. You do everything else the same, just no treat in hand. Spin around, good job, boom, there's the treat. So it's just a difference between when the dog sees the treat. So that's what reinforcing is, to provide it after they've done the behavior. So fading out the lure involves giving all the same physical and verbal cues that were given when the treat was produced before the behavior, so that the dog can comply and understand. Does that make sense? All right. So yes, it's totally good and fine to use food to train your dog. All right. Feeding my dog from the table will cause my dog to beg at the table, or using people food in training will make my dog beg at the table. So nobody likes a dog who begs. So feeding your dog anything, even dog food from the dining room table, will make your dog beg at the table, because they have a reinforcement history of begging at the table and having it pay off for them. So we don't want to feed our dog from the table. We don't want to let anybody else feed our dog from the table. We want to be always consistent with what is allowed and what is not allowed. Dogs should have a go to your place or stay away cue while people are eating. I don't like my dogs staring at me while I eat. I don't know about you. And if dogs are behaving calmly while you eat, then it's totally fine to feed them a few bites of people food away from the table or even in their dog bowl to minimize confusion. And I actually am very bad about this. I live by myself, and so I like to sometimes eat dinner in my comfy chair in my living room. And my dogs like to come and stare at me because they know that I save them, you know, the last bites. And sometimes I'm too lazy to get up and ask for behaviors before I give it to them or put it in their bowl or whatever. So I finish my food and I'm like, okay, come on, you guys. So, but it's a fine line, because I really get peevish when they stare at me the whole time I'm eating. Like, I just really hate that. But I have to realize that I've reinforced it to a certain extent, because I've allowed them to have that expectation that when I am done, they're going to have some of what I was eating. And so I have a swing gate between my kitchen and my living room, and if I really don't want dogs staring at me, I just put them in the kitchen and close the thing and go finish my food, and when I'm done, I will bring something in there. But just an example, it's so easy for them to make connections about what they're going to get and when they're going to get it, that it can look like begging. But if we stop and think about what it is that we've taught them, sometimes we can realize that actually we taught them to do that, and then we can teach them to do something different. All right. We're doing on time. Good. So, spot the myth. Wolf behavior is completely irrelevant to how we live and interact with our dogs. Or, dogs are descended from wolves, and therefore, training should be based on how wolf packs interact with each other. So this is a big controversy for a lot of people. There's a lot of common knowledge, right, that tries to extrapolate a lot of wolf stuff into dog behavior. And the reality is that wolf behavior is completely irrelevant to how we live and interact with our dogs. And I know that that probably runs contrary to what you may have heard in the past, but the reality is that, first of all, in the wild, wolves live in family groups, a mom, a dad, some aunts and uncles, and some kids. And so there isn't the jockeying for position in the pack or any of that. Everybody knows their place and who's in charge of what, and they cooperate and they live and work together. Secondly, our dogs know that we are not dogs or wolves, and yet they do know that we are in charge. So there's no like necessity. Like I say here, any dog training advice that encourages people to be alpha or dominant over their dog is outdated and can be harmful to your relationship with your dog. One of the first books that talked about this alpha dominant stuff was How to Be Your Dog's Best Friend by the Monks of New Skeet. And these guys have been raising dogs for a really long time, and their hearts are absolutely in the right place. And due to some faulty scientific information being disseminated, In that original book, they do actually talk about dominance and alpha rolling, and in later years, Brother Gregory, who was responsible for that being in there, has said that, you know, it is his biggest regret, because it is an idea that people have internalized and have used to treat their dogs in ways that are not conducive to a good relationship and can even be dangerous. Because if you try to do any kind of a dominant dog behavior to a dog, you know, they're going to be confused and they're going to feel concerned, and we don't know how a dog is going to react when they feel concerned. So in order to keep ourselves safe, right, and keep our dogs happy, we want to make sure that we're not doing scary, weird stuff, right, because we read it somewhere and somebody told us that that was what we should do. So yeah, while dogs do seem to perceive human family members as pack mates, right, in terms of sort of, this is what we are doing together now, we are a group, we are a unit, it's more relevant to emotional affection and love and group activity than it is to any kind of hierarchy or dominance. Your dog's not always trying to one-up you and become the pack leader or whatever. And you may see, if you have more than one dog, that one dog is dominant over the other one in that particular situation. And I try not to mess with that. My little dog is actually very dominant over my large dog. And I don't like how she treats him sometimes, but you can't change that. So I feed her first, and she gets the bone first. And, you know, she gets everything first, because otherwise she punishes him if I do it wrong. So yes, there is such a thing as pack hierarchy that dogs will sort out for themselves, but it's nothing that we as humans really need to try and imitate, because it's not really useful in that way. Also, when wolf behavior is referenced in dog training, the most commonly cited theories and studies are based on incorrect understandings of wolf behavior that have been disproven by scientists. So basically, the family group idea as opposed to the constantly shifting pack dominance hierarchy. Yeah. Okay, well that's all of our myths. How did everybody do? Did you guys get them all right? Yeah. All right, way to go. No, brag away. Good job. Okay, so to sum up, be suspicious of advice, friends, family, internet, dog trainers, whatever, that encourages you to punish or discipline your dog for any reason. Dogs are not children. Dogs do not have morals. Dogs do not understand the human ideas of manners and politeness. Okay, and those are things that dogs really can't learn. Dogs can learn that when they do something and you reinforce them for it, you liked it and you want them to do it again, and good things will be coming their way. But discipline and punishment is really just emotionally stressful and confusing, and it doesn't get us what we want. It does not get us the behaviors that we want. It's important to understand dogs' cognitive limitations. They seem so smart, and they are. They really, really are, and they've managed to co-evolve with us and coexist with us and work in partnership with us. And sometimes, unfortunately, we do them a disservice by thinking that they know and understand more than they do. And that's called anthropomorphizing. We think that they think like we think, but they think like dogs think, and it's much, much different. It's much simpler. So try not to anthropomorphize. That is, try not to put human ideas and emotions and behaviors on your dog and say he is doing this because, or he is thinking this because really all we know for sure is what the dog is doing, and we can try to figure out why, and usually it's a simple reason, because of something in the environment, because the behavior's been reinforced, etc. So there's really no need to go into sort of this dog philosophy of what the dog is thinking, or you know, what they're plotting their revenge or something. Dogs are not cognitively capable of that kind of thought. So it's important to remember that as intelligent as they appear to us, they are not capable of understanding things in the same way and to the same extent that humans are. Give dogs the benefit of the doubt. That is, if your dog is not obeying a command that you feel that they should know, look around the environment, see if they're distracted, if there's a reason why they can't obey you. Assume that they are not as smart as you think, rather than assuming that they're not obeying because they are stubborn or they want to dominate you or whatever. Just give them the benefit of the doubt. They're just dogs. and we love them, and we have wonderful relationships with them, but ultimately, you know, they can't think like we do, and we do them a pretty big disservice when we sort of behave as though they can. And remember that dogs are our friends, and always treat them accordingly. It's tempting sometimes to treat our dogs like children and punish them in the way that we would punish children, but it's a much, much different relationship, and so I try really hard to help people move out of that sort of parenthood paradigm around their dogs and realize that, no, your dog is your friend. And so when you speak to your dog and you do things around your dog, and you include your dogs in activities, it's just important to remember that they are our friends, and that we want them to feel good and happy and have a nice time, and that we usually can be gentle with them and patient with them, and that is more likely to get us what we want than to be harsh or punitive and, you know, and have emotional anger towards our dog when they're not obeying us, because they're our friends. And so, like, I always try to think about it like talking to my dog like I would talk to a friend, or like if we're going somewhere or coming back from somewhere and it's, you know, loading in and loading out and different things like that. And it's like if I was taking my friend to the beach, you know, I'd be like, okay, let's go. And okay, I'm gonna open your door. Okay, go ahead and get in. And then if my friend hesitated to get in, I wouldn't be like, get in the car right now. I'd be like, what's going on? Why don't you want to get in the car, right? And so, and same for, you know, any kind of activities, really. It's just sort of remember that they're our friends, not our children, and remember to just be patient and kind with them and realize that they're not as intelligent as we are, or rather they possess a different kind of intelligence, and sometimes that's what leads to this communication breakdowns. But if we remember that they're our friends, and we remember that they are not wolves, and we remember that there is good behavioral science available to us to teach us how to teach our dogs in a way that is mutually fulfilling and satisfying for everybody, then everything's gonna be awesome. So that is dog myths versus realities. Hopefully there was some stuff in there that maybe you were not aware of prior. Hopefully you learned something today. And even if you knew all the answers already, your friends and family probably don't. And so I will ask you from the bottom of my heart, when you're interacting with friends and family about dog stuff and people bring up these myths and these falsehoods, to gently let them know that in fact there is science that says otherwise, and that our relationship with our dog can be different, and that we don't have to live by those sort of old ideas that have been basically disproven at this point. So thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you, MCAT. And we'll go ahead and take a little break. And if anybody has questions and wants to come back in 5 minutes for some question and answer, we can do that. Otherwise, thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking time on a Sunday to come and hang out and learn a little bit of dog stuff with us. So thanks very much.
Yeah, Robyn. Thank you.